What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a great day today. Today, what we're going to be doing is talking about some of the most improved teams from the NHL offseason and some teams who I think are going to take the biggest leap in the standings this year compared to the last hockey season. Now, these are a few teams that I feel like either underperformed last year, were injured, or just didn't really play up to their potential, and who I think is going to take a bigger leap based on the offseason acquisitions they made or just the development of their players. So if you guys have been enjoying the content lately and want to support the channel, as always, make sure you like this video and subscribe now. It'll let you know whenever I post fun new content like this, and let's get right into this one. All right, let's start with the first team on my list, the Chicago Blackhawks. A pretty obvious rebuild happening for this organization right now. They get the first overall pick a couple years back, draft connorbedard, who has a very promising rookie season, and then they also get the second overall pick, grabbing Lev Shinov this year, starting to rebuild this organization from the Kane and Taves days. This past season, though, it wasn't exactly all that thrilling outside of watching connorbedard. The team finishes with a 23-53-6 record, grand totaling 52 points. And the two stats that really stand out to me was one, the goal differential, which is just putrid, a minus 111 on the season, and their terrible away record of 732-2. Now, obviously, the Blackhawks dealt with a ton of injuries, but it's really more of a roster construction issue for this team right now than anything else. But I do really like some of the offseason acquisitions that they made, and I think that this is going to push this team a little bit further in the standings than last year, just based on a couple of these moves. Now let's talk about some of the acquisitions. First, they grabbed Tyler Bertuzzi and Teuvo Teravainen to finally give connorbedard a few players to play alongside with versus the AHL players he was most likely playing with last year. They also are getting Taylor Hall back and Nick Foligno from injury, so their forward group is definitely looking a little bit more promising than it was in 2023-24. As for their defense, they didn't make any real significant changes. They added Alec Martinez, who according to Daily Faceoff is set to be on their third line defensive pairing. I expect that to change. He's going to bump up. The other players in this defensive group just aren't all that talented. Their goaltending is pretty much going to be the same, still rocking with Peter Mrazek, but they do get themselves a nice tandem player in Laurent Brossoit, who should be a little bit more consistent for them as they go throughout the season. Like I said, I'm not expecting the Chicago Blackhawks to become a playoff team. I don't even think they're going to be anywhere near the wild card, in fact, but I do expect them to get a lot more points than they did last season and win a few more games than they did last year as well. For the Blackhawks, I expect them to finish around the 30 win mark. I could see them easily winning about 7 more games this season, finishing with around the upper 60 points, maybe even 70 to boot. I could see them being around the same that Arizona finished last year. I do like the additions. I think Connor Bedard's going to take a step, and I think playing with players like Teravainen and Bertuzzi over the players he was playing with last year is definitely going to allow him to have more space on the ice and create more opportunities. I like the Blackhawks this year. They're not making the playoffs, but I do expect them to take a pretty big jump. Next up, we have a team that's pretty similar to Chicago with a few differences, but the state of the overall franchise is about the same. The Anaheim Ducks have been a lottery team over the past couple of seasons, but they have definitely gathered a ton of talent in these different drafts. First off, their forward group looks incredibly promising, especially their top 6. Leo Carlsson, Troy Terry, Cutter Gauthier, Trevor Zegras, Vatrano, Mason McTavish. They have a lot of players in their forward group, and if every single one of these guys pans out, this team could be a very deep roster over the next couple of seasons. But their defense, it's pretty underwhelming, especially when you take a look at some of these guys on their current roster. Zellweger and Mityukov, they've shown some promise, but they're still very young and need a little bit more growing time before they can be the top line players for this team without a veteran alongside them. Then, of course, you have the guys like Fowler and Gudas, who should be fine, but they're nothing really to write home about. I'm not very trusting of this defensive core. I think that they're fine, but they're definitely in the bottom 15 of the NHL. And their defense, with John Gibson, who knows what you're going to get on a year-to-year basis, and Doss still does look nice at moments, but neither of them have the blue line that's going to allow them to be the exceptional goalie that they could potentially be on other teams. I like the Ducks, though. I do think that their forward group is going to take a step forward this year. Leo Carlsson had a pretty promising rookie season, and with Trevor Zegras being injured for most of the year, he showed what he was capable at the end of the season when he was finally healthy again. Of course, guys like Troy Terry, Alex Killorn, Cutter Gauthier, and Vatrano, they're going to benefit from both Carlsson and Zegras being healthy, and I think that their forward group is going to continue to develop together and put up some more points and wins on the season for the Ducks. I like this team. I expect them, similar to the Blackhawks, to finish with at least 10 10 more points this year. The Ducks had 27 wins, 50 losses, and 5 OT losses, like the Blackhawks, with one of the worst goal differentials in the league, a -91, with also a pretty subpar home record, 12, 26, and 3. The Ducks will have a better year. Nothing crazy. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but with the Calgary Flames entering a rebuild and the Kraken being a bit directionless, I think they have an opportunity to get themselves kind of a little bit higher in the standing this year compared to last. Next up, I have the Nashville Predators, a team that a lot of hockey fans are pretty high on for this upcoming season, and there's a few reasons why. Of course, they made some nice offseason acquisitions, Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea, Jonathan Marchessault, to not only round out their forward group and boost up their goal potential, but to make their defensive unit a little bit stronger as well. They also decide to pay UC Saros, making him their goaltender for the foreseeable future, moving on from Askarov as well. I just think that this team, they finally picked a direction. They were a middle-of-the-pack organization, and they decided they wanted to go all in. They felt like a lot of their core pieces were capable of getting this team to a Stanley Cup, and I actually believe in Barry Trotz and the vision that he has for this organization. Now, potential-wise, I'm not too sure with this one. I do think that they're capable of winning the division if everything works out perfectly, but we haven't seen this roster play yet, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I could see them finishing around the same mark as the Colorado Avalanche last year, around 105 to 107 points, maybe finishing in that third or second spot, depending on how things go in the division. I just feel like the top 4 teams in this division are incredible, so for Nashville to get a lot better, they're going to have to play in those kind of tough games against those other 3 teams. So like I said, I want to see them play a little bit more first, but I think they're definitely capable of taking a huge jump this year and being a serious contender for the Cup if everything works out perfectly the way that Barry Trotz has imagined things. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, a team that I actually predicted to go all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals last year because I believed in their young core, but unfortunately, injuries, their goaltending issues, their defensive woes, it all kind of just hit them all at once, and this team was kept out of the playoffs. Now, of course, their forward group is easily the best part of this roster. They have one of the best top 6s in the NHL who are still very young and have a ton of potential, like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Timo Meier, Dawson Mercer, and then adding some nice depth pieces like Stefan Noesen and Thomas Tatar. Their defense also took a pretty big step forward, adding guys like Brett Pesce and Brendan Dillon. And then, of course, the biggest and most significant impact move for the Devils was adding Jacob Markstrom to this team to really fix a lot of the goaltending issues that they had last year. Now, Markstrom and Allen are a huge step forward for this organization compared to the tandem that they were running last year. And if guys like Jack Hughes and Dougie Hamilton can come off their IR injuries from last year and be the same players, I think that the sky's the limit for the Devils. Now, in terms of finishing in the standings, the Devils finished with a 38, 39, and 5 record last year, a -19 goal differential, and a pretty mediocre season overall. But I could see them finishing around the same mark as the New York Islanders from last season, around 94 to 100 points, taking around the 3rd spot in this division. I still think that the Hurricanes and the Rangers are going to be better than them this year, despite all of the stuff we just talked about. Either way, though, I like this Devils team. I think that with this new head coach, the acquisitions they made, the sky is the limit for them. I could see them going from 7th in the division all the way to around where the Islanders finished last year, around 94 to 100 points. I still think that the Rangers and Hurricanes are going to be better, but I do see the potential with this team and expect them to take a jump. Next on my list, the Ottawa Senators. Now, I feel like I've been saying this for years, beating the same dead horse over and over and over, expecting the Senators to just click and finally put everything together. But I'm a little bit more optimistic this year than I have been in the past. Now, everyone knows they have one of the best young forward cores in the NHL. Guys like Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, and of course guys like Shane Pinto, who are going to come back from that strange suspension that he was dealing with last year. There's definitely a lot there, a lot of promise. But the problem with the Ottawa Senators is that their coaching hasn't been consistent enough, their defense hasn't been consistent enough, and sort of like the Devils, they just aren't healthy enough to really be taken seriously when it comes to the Atlantic Division, which in my opinion is the most competitive of all 4. Now, when I say that the Senators are going to take a jump, I don't expect them to be a top 3 team in the division like I've seen some people predict. I just don't think that that's their ceiling at the moment. But I do expect them to be at least in the wild card race this season compared to last year. I felt like they were out way too early, and a lot of people had Buffalo even ahead of them in the standings. For the Senators, I could see them finishing around the same mark as the Detroit Red Wings. I feel like their rosters are very similar, and with the addition of Linus Ullmark, I think the Senators are finally going to have a goalie that they can rely on versus guys like Joonas Korpisalo, who ended up just being big busts for the organization. Like I said, there's a lot of potential with the Ottawa Senators, but they need to just just kind of fix a lot of their inconsistencies and make sure that the whole roster is out there playing to their full potential versus some guys being all in and some guys sort of just showing up on one night versus the other one. It just isn't going to work like that. I could see the Senators taking that leap. Everything has to click. If the new head coach works out for them, then great. But potential-wise, I could see them finishing around the same as the Detroit Red Wings. But for me, I think that their high ceiling is going to be 90 points, and I expect them to reach that this year. And last but not least on my list is the Vegas Golden Knights, a team that I think the biggest story with them was injuries last year. Of course, I'm not talking about the ones to like Mark Stone that they do intentionally. I'm talking about small ones to guys like Jack Eichel who are missing time in the middle of the regular season, which kind of makes them a worse team. The Vegas Golden Knights finished with a 45-29-8 record. Yes, they lost a few pieces in the offseason, guys like Alec Martinez, Jonathan Marchessault, Chandler Stevenson, a little bit of their depth, but I do think that they're going to be fine because they got players like Thomas Hertl at the deadline last year who basically is going to make them the same team before the trade deadline, if that makes sense. I like this Vegas team, and I still think that they're capable of being one of the top teams in the West. I could even see them topping over two of the teams that they were under last year, depending on the regression that we see from the Vancouver Canucks, if they have any at all, and of course only being 1 point back from the Kings, who I think got slightly worse this offseason. I like Vegas. I could see them finishing with maybe 5 to 6 more points than they did last year, around the 100 to 104 point mark. It's not to say that I think that they're better than the Oilers or the Canucks, because I do think they're still going to finish behind those two teams, but I definitely think that they weren't playing to their true potential last year, and that with some of the stuff they were dealing with, they were definitely held back. So I could see Vegas taking a jump this year and still being one of the top teams in the NHL. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on them for this upcoming season, just based on some of the stuff that we saw last year. But let me know what you guys think. Do you like my predictions here? Do you think that these teams are going to take a significant jump this season compared to last year? Or am I just being a little bit too optimistic and there are a few other teams that deserve the credit over these ones? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I'll see you guys in the next one.